welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. We all know the saying, knowledge is power, but how many of us apply it in the workplace? In this episode, we'll be discussing business intelligence, what it is and how it can improve your business or your organization. We are thus delighted to have Raquel Seville, a business intelligence expert, a published author with over a decade of experience in the field. Raquel is also the CEO for the Caribbean region for Brainz, a business intelligence and analytics consulting and solutions company, headquartered in the US but with offices in Jamaica, which Raquel heads the UK and South Africa. Raquel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Okay, to just get the ball rolling, let's just clarify, what is business intelligence?
Okay. All right. So business intelligence is the use of tools, processes, different strategies to pull data, to consolidate the data, and to analyze and report on the data with the main purpose of making decisions. That's the main goal for business intelligence. It should support an outcome, a decision making for an organization.
And how would you say business intelligence is different from data analytics?
Okay, so data analytics in essence is more discovery and also exploring data. So for data analytics, it really and truly can be done by anyone in an organization. So for example, how things are these days, how things are changing, I should say, in terms of the landscape, you have companies now where data has been democratized. And that simply means that you have anyone, anywhere that can do data analysis, right? So persons may have Tableau, they may have Power BI, they may have all these tools that help them to do some amount of data discovery and data analysis, and then they're empowered and they're doing data analysis. While business intelligence, as I mentioned before, is more of a more specialization then, right? That can involve data analysis, but it's much broader than that, right? Because then you're pulling in data, you're analyzing the data, you're massaging the data, you're transforming the data with the goal of reporting, with the goal of decision making, with the goal of, at the end of the day, reducing expenses and also ensuring that a company is profitable.
And how would you also then say that business intelligence is different from market intelligence?
Mm-hmm. Okay, good one, right? So for market intelligence, typically it's focused around the customer and focused around either trying to build out like a 360 view of the customer or the customer journey and how that ties into the different marketing strategies that are being used within an organization. So marketing intelligence in most companies typically rely on the output of the business intelligence team. So the business intelligence team will pull in the data, gathering it, ensuring that reports are done, ensuring that analysis is done, and then maybe the marketing intelligence team will then take those reports or take the data from a data warehouse or a data lake and then do their analysis and then do their reports and then do their presentations that they may need to do, right? So there's a difference. There are overlaps, of course, between data analysis, business intelligence, market intelligence, but there's still some uniqueness that for market intelligence, the focus is generally around the customer and also the success and whatever return on investment or ROI that you can get from the marketing spend and how that brings in new customers or brings in new revenue into the business.
I have a couple of questions based on what you said. First, are there any sort of predefined standards or metrics or measures that a business intelligence exercise must include?
Mm-hmm. Well, typically, business intelligence for companies that have sort of built out a BI team or have any sort of infrastructure relating to business intelligence, typically they want to focus on sales or your revenue, just as a basic metric. Also, they want to look at expenses, what are your costs? And companies also want to look at customers, right? Who are our customers? What are they doing? Are they staying with us? Are they repeating? Are they leaving us? That sort of thing, to answer those questions. And then companies also want to look at products or services, right? Because any business must be offering some sort of product or service. So they want to look at that and how that relates. And the thing with business intelligence is that you get to slice and dice and sort of look at the data from different angles, right? So you can look at maybe what, customers have, what products, and then what sales or revenue that brings in, or what segments a customer is in. And, so you can get to do a little bit more deep dive analysis. So you're not looking at the data in silos. Typically, that's the main focus for any company, any organization. You want to know how you're doing. You want to know who your customers are, and then you also want to have an idea of your products or services, how that is going, right? But then you'll have more specific KPIs or key performance indicators based on industry. So for banking, they may want to know, okay, well, what is our return on asset, or what is our return on equity, or something like that. So they would have a different KPI that maybe would not translate to publishing company, or maybe would not translate to even telecoms, maybe. Like for telecoms, which is where I spent a lot of my career, there are specific KPIs that are being tracked from a telecom perspective, like ARPU, which is average revenue per user, and that may not necessarily be something that is tracked in other industries, even though it could be useful as well, right? So they're main metrics or measures that will translate across any business, no matter the industry. And then when you start to deep dive into the different industries, then you'll find that they're very, very specific KPIs that relate only to that particular industry.
Understood. Mm-hmm. And just another question following from something you said earlier, in terms of, you use terms like data lakes and data warehouses, which sounds quite complicated and elaborate. And I wondered whether or not, is there like any size of business to which, business intelligence, I guess that whole sphere of business intelligence would apply? Does it mean that they need to have those sorts of capabilities or access to those sorts of facilities, for example, in terms of data warehouses and data lakes?
Mm-hmm. All right, so that is a really good question, because that is something I think that, being in the Caribbean, that's also a question that I get asked by other companies as well, right? So my answer to that would be, every company needs business intelligence, because if you're not analyzing your data, if you don't know who your customers are, if you can't simply just, cross match, a customer to a product, to sales, to maybe a customer segment, age group, all these different things. If you can't do simple analysis like that, then it's going to be very difficult for you to thrive and grow and be successful in the future, right? Because things are shifting. And if you're familiar with anything in the data space or in the business intelligence space, you'll hear a person saying that data is the new oil, right? Which means at the end of the day, data is extremely valuable, and it's pretty much a currency on its own in the business world, in the business domain. I mean, even for you, Michelle, even doing a podcast, it's important for you to have an understanding of who your listeners are, which are your customers. Maybe you want to know, the segments, are you more popular in a particular age group? Are you more popular with a particular gender? Is it more males, females that listen? And that's just running a podcast, right? So as far as I'm concerned, for business intelligence, there's no one that should be excluded from business intelligence. It's important to everyone. And if you're not making use of the analysis, and you don't have to necessarily have the investment of a data warehouse, which is really and truly just consolidating all the data that you have from different databases into one space. And some persons call it a data warehouse, which is a more traditional terminology. And then you have persons that will use a data lake, which is more modern and a little bit more flexible than what a data warehouse would be, right? So companies don't necessarily have to be making that investment just yet, but they have to at least be able to answer some of those questions. And there are companies who can't answer those questions, right? So that's why it is important for any company, no matter the size, to ensure that they at least have a view of their customers, have a view of their sales, have a view of their pipeline, right? Because that's your that's the longevity of your business, right? Who are your leads? Who are your prospects? And then how do you convert them into your customers? And then what do your customers look like so you can keep appealing to them?
Definitely. So, in addition to, I guess, that misconception about size of business to
Right.
applicability of business intelligence, what are some of the other misconceptions that you tend to hear?
All right. There are a few of them. As you said, one of them would be, okay, I'm too small. I really don't need this. And as I said, I mean, it doesn't matter the size. If you're running a blog, you need to know the analysis, which was really the really good thing with Google Analytics, right? For person to get the behind the scenes view of that. And that's just proof that business intelligence and analytics has nothing to do with size or scale or industry or anything like that. It's valid across every single business. So that is one of the misconceptions. Another misconception is that you need to go out and invest in a tool, right? A lot of persons when they hear business intelligence automatically tied to software. And that's not necessarily the case because a lot of it is really around strategy. There are companies that are doing business intelligence just with Excel and running a couple queries on a database, extracting the data and doing what they need to do. And they're answering questions without having made an investment in a software and paying licenses and all of these other things that come with it. So that's a common misconception that if you're doing BI and you don't have a tool, then you're not really doing business intelligence, right? It's really more around strategy and approach and outcome. Those are some of the key things because you do have companies that have tools, heavy investment in tools, and still have no outcome, still have no strategy, right? So that's another misconception. And another one that I can think of is, especially here in the Caribbean, persons think that, we're just not there yet. It's more of a first world thing. It's more Google and Facebook and those people that doing that kind of analysis. And that's not true either because you do have the skill sets here in the Caribbean, that's for one. And you do have companies here that are making the investment in business intelligence and in analysis, right? So you have, for example, in Jamaica, you have like an NCB who is doing a lot of that, who actually has their own dedicated data science and business intelligence team. Digicel would be a popular example everyone would be familiar with across the Caribbean. K-Band Wireless as well, in terms of making that investment in not just the infrastructure, but also the human resources. And those persons are either they're here in the Caribbean or they've moved on to other roles outside the Caribbean as well. So that's a misconception that we don't have the skill sets or we're not at the level of a Fortune 100 company or Fortune 500 company to be making that sort of investment in not just the human resource, but also the infrastructure for business intelligence and data.
Yeah, and some really good points because clearly, as you rightfully said, we all need data to make more informed decisions.
All right. Yes.
So let me ask another question. To what degree does an organization's operating environment is it considered in a sort of business intelligence exercise?
All right, so it definitely would be considered. The environment and the culture of an organization is important because that can impact the success of a business intelligence project or the longevity of what's happening with, because a lot of what is done in business intelligence and analytics is really agile and transformational because there's so much that changes so rapidly. So like when I started out my career, there was no streaming data that you would have, right? Like data that you'd be getting that would be coming in just created in nanoseconds. That did not exist. Data was more structured. It was more, okay, this is coming in probably every minute or every something like that, and it's coming in this specific format, and then you know what to do. Right now you have data that is being generated through social media, through Internet of Things, all these different devices, and it can be any format, it can be any type, it can be anything. And that shows how the space has changed so much, right? So the environment, the culture, all of these things matter because business intelligence and because the field of data is changing so rapidly, right? So you have to have an understanding of the operating environment, you have to have an understanding of the culture, and you have to be able to navigate all of that to ensure that you have success and you continue to evolve to meet the different changes that are happening rapidly. Or even there are changes happening rapidly within your organization that you'd be working for, and there are also external factors that would impact you as well. So it does matter. It does influence business intelligence success or lack thereof.
Okay. Because I'm thinking though that, especially since one is looking for, ultimately the analysis and informed decision making, that one then needs to take into account external factors,
Right.
the environment, the operating environment, as you said, the organizational culture, etc., to
Right.
just ensure that the rigor of the recommendations or the information that I guess will be passed on, that
Right.
people within the organization will rely upon.
Right. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious though about how you actually got into business intelligence, because I'm sure that as much as we have known that data is important, it wasn't necessarily always that way. And I'm sure that your career has been one of transition and change. So, but I'm curious as to how you got started and how it has evolved into where it is now.
Sure. So I did computer science and linguistics as my undergrad at University of West Indies, and then I did my master's like right after my undergrad, right, in management information systems, and I knew from doing my computer science degree that I didn't necessarily want to do software engineering or programming, but I like more on the side of artificial intelligence, on the side of database programming and that sort of thing. I had an interest more on that side and not necessarily building software. So I thought that that would have been my focus. However, when I was doing my undergrad degree, there was nothing around business intelligence, data science. Those concepts had no sort of academic subjects or specializations that I could tap into. I just knew that I had an interest in a particular segment, and I didn't know where it would have led me anyway. So I got an internship when I was doing my master's at Cape Wireless, and that was really funny enough to actually build a prototype software for the Cricket World Cup that Cape Wireless had been sponsoring at that point in time. And then that internship turned into a full-time offer after like 2 or 3 months on the business intelligence team at Cape Wireless at the time. So I literally, I guess you could say, sort of fell into it by not even understanding what I was getting into. I started as a data analyst in the business intelligence team, and I worked in terms of providing report, providing an analysis, and then I also did ETL. ETL pretty much means extract, transform, load, which is literally just moving data from the different sources that you may have to bring them into a centralized area, which at the time was a data warehouse that existed. So that's pretty much how I got started in business intelligence. And then I moved from Cape Wireless to Digicel, and then Digicel to Columbus Communications, doing the same thing. I've been a SaaS programmer, I've been a business intelligence developer, data warehouse specialist, all different sort of roles. And then I eventually landed a role as the director, got promoted rather internally at Cape Wireless after an acquisition by Liberty Global as the director for analytics and intelligence. And I was just reporting into Miami and then responsible now for analytics and intelligence across the entire Caribbean group. So that I spent about 2 years doing that. And then there's this opportunity to pretty much transfer all the skills that I've had over the years into a CEO role to pretty much lead the Caribbean entity for BI Brainz, which is focused on obviously business intelligence, analytics, and all of those things, right? So that's pretty much how it's been. It's really been, if I really look back and just being honest, it's really been a blessing because I had no intent and I had no knowledge that just sort of starting in this role that I've gotten from the internship would have led to an entire career in business intelligence and data science and spanning all the different areas and learn everything I did and all the experience that I have over the years. So that's pretty much how I got started and pretty much how it has transitioned to where I am today.
Okay. So in being the head for the Caribbean for BI Brainz, and certainly based on your own experience in business intelligence, What has been the reception like? How receptive have organizations been to business intelligence and being able to embrace that within the organization?
All right, so it's been interesting.
That sounds like a euphemism for not great, but go ahead.
No, it's been interesting because I guess of the culture of the Caribbean. So you have companies that are already ahead of the curve, right? And that's typically banking and telecoms company because they get it because their whole competitive advantage outside of everything that they do is data. So they understand that, okay, if I don't really and truly tap into this, then I don't necessarily have a competitive advantage because you can keep dropping rates, you can keep, offering this product until a competitor comes and does the same thing, and then it becomes just a price war, and then it's pretty much useless. So they understand that the data and tapping into that to offer innovative product services, very targeted products and services, very niche to understand your customer segments and all of those things. They understand that the data that they have is extremely important to do that, right? Which is why like digital can offer some of the products that they do because it's very niche, it's very segmented, and it's very targeted to specific customers who fall within certain segments or certain spending brackets or something like that, right? So there are those persons in the Caribbean that they totally get it, and having a conversation with them it's easy because they already understand the value. And then there are other companies that you really and truly have to sort of evangelize to them to get them to understand that, okay, things are shifting, the sort of gut feeling, I think we should do this because, or, I've always done it this way, so let's just continue doing it this way without no sort of empirical data, no evidence, nothing to back it. Those persons are very challenging to sort of win over, which is why I say you have to do sort of evangelism. And I try to do that somehow through like social media, speaking at different conferences, putting out content, doing blogs and all these different things, just to have a voice, just to say, okay, maybe if persons sort of see the value and then see the stories from someone that is homegrown, that will sort of connect. So it's not a overseas consultant coming to you and telling you the wonderful joys and benefits of this. Someone that's here, someone that has grown up and built their career here in the Caribbean, working for regional companies, maybe not necessarily, obviously not owned by Caribbean people, but having that experience here in the Caribbean, and that's valuable. So it's really that sort of two-sided or double-edged sword that you sort of work with, where you have persons that are very much pliable and very much understanding of the value of data and the value of analysis and the value of how this supports decision making and the value of how this is your competitive advantage, how this separates you from your competitor because your data is unique to you. And then there's the other side where you really and truly have to do a lot more around just educating people and getting persons to understand that the sad truth is that if they don't embrace their data, and if they don't embrace doing some of these things, then they won't survive the digital wave that's happening, right? They're not going to come out on the winning side, unfortunately. And it's hard sometimes to paint that picture to some persons. We've had successes, quite a lot of successes in terms of companies that we've been able to work with here for the past little over a year that we've been operational. However, there's still another side where persons still kind of say, yeah, I've always done it this way. I'm good. I'll just manage a spreadsheet or I'll just do whatever. And they're still not getting the wider view of how important this is. So that's really been the challenge if I had to sort of, sum it up in that way.
Understood. I want to shift to talk about advice because I think we could begin to wind down shortly. But what would be some of the important skills that individuals who work in business intelligence ought to possess? So if somebody wanted, young people looking at areas that they probably should pursue.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a really interesting one because, as I said, like when I was doing computer science, I had no idea that any of this existed. And I talk to young persons even now, and they still have no idea. Like when I talk to a person, explain what I do, they're like, really, that exists? There's a company in Jamaica doing that. They really don't know. So that's a really valid question, because I think it's important that persons understand what is required to get into different fields. There's not one path. If you do computer science, you don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to do software engineering. There are so many different areas that you can branch off into. All right. So for business intelligence, I think that you can. I think there are two sides to it. Like most fields, there's the hard skills and then there's the soft skills, right? So for the hard skills would be having an understanding of database technology, right? Which pretty much would be covered if you've done any sort of undergrad degree in IT or computer studies or computer science. So just having an understanding of database technology, or that's something you can actually go online and learn as well with all these free courses, and understand how to program and pull and extract data and insights from these database technologies, which obviously would require to have some knowledge of SQL to be able to run a query and extract data and then do something with that data. All right, so that's very basic and very important as a hard skill. Also, what I think would be important is having an understanding of data visualization techniques and best practices, right? So with the plethora of tools that are available now, I think everyone kind of feels like, they can throw up a chart and build a dashboard, but that's not necessarily adhering to proper principles, right? For data visualization, because maybe they're using too much color. They're probably trying to use all the color in the world and all the graphs in the world, all the charts in the world. So I think it would be good to have an understanding of data visualization best practices and how to use color, how to use specific charts for certain things. That's very important, because presentation of data is extremely critical, because you could have data in a spreadsheet and someone look at it and does not even understand what you're trying to tell them, and you could easily transfer that into a graph, and in a couple seconds they grasp exactly what you're saying, right? So it's very important to understand how to show data visually and effectively. And another skill, not a hard skill, is having an understanding of, so I said, data visualization, databases, and also being able to, programming helps. For example, if you know Python or Java, that's definitely helpful if you know that, because you can't get away sometimes from actually going and doing some coding in business intelligence or in analytics. Sometimes you just actually have to go back to your core, just if you're trying to get some things done, especially with especially different data sources these days, where you probably need to pull something from an API, you probably need to pull something from a Google form or something like that. All of these different things may require you to have to tap back into your programming skill sets, right? So those would be definitely some of the hard skills that would definitely be important. And then I think the soft skills are actually equally important to me, because I think that you could take someone who maybe did chemistry or did physics, and you could do a boot camp with them and get them up to scratch with some of these skill sets. But the real differentiating factor that's really going to help you in terms of your success is going to be your soft skills, right? And your soft skills would speak to, how do you communicate? Are you able to properly communicate? Are you able to properly express yourself? Because you're working with data, and data is essentially useless if it's not analyzed, and if you're not pulling the insights out, and then if you're not able to properly communicate those insights. So your ability to communicate is very important. Storytelling is important, which is something that we emphasize a lot at BI Brainz. We have storytelling workshops and all of those things. Just your ability to take data, to take information, and then build a story around it that will appeal to your users, right? That's very specific to your audience. So that's very important. And I think problem solving is important, because you may get a problem, or you may have something that you need to do, or you may have a project that you're working on. And I can tell you, like, throughout my entire career, I spent a lot of time problem solving and troubleshooting and figuring things out, right? Things change. Things are not necessarily what you expect them to be. And, there are times when you may have challenges, and if you're not good, if you don't have strong problem solving skills, then you get really stuck. So that's very important as well. And I think just being able to be adaptable, because things change so rapidly and you have to be a little bit more agile in how you function. I think that will help you. And just being able to do some amount of teamwork, as much as sometimes technical persons would tend to sort of prefer to work alone or prefer to, sort of figure things out on our own, in our own space. You have to be able to sort of collaborate and work with persons and bounce idea off persons and maybe get input, maybe get someone to see from a different angle or different perspective as well.
Definitely. Yes, I fully take on board the point that you made in terms of the hard skills might be teachable, but some of the soft skills, those might be more qualities that one might need the person to possess.
Correct.
In and of themselves. Okay, so as we wind down, I'm going to tap you for some advice.
Okay.
So for organizations that want to begin to rely on business intelligence, what might be some of the first set of questions they should be asking themselves?
Okay. All right. So you should be relying on business intelligence, so you should be relying on some amount of analytics. So for companies that want to tap into business intelligence, I think you definitely have to, I would say, not focus on a tool, because a lot of companies start with a tool and then think that's going to solve all their problems, and then they still have the problem because there was no strategy, there was no focus around what they were trying to do. So I think a good starting point is typically companies would have their goals, right, or vision. They would have some short, maybe medium and long-term goals that they'd want to accomplish. So I think if you look at that at a higher level, then it's a good compass for you to say, okay, well, if you want to, for example, triple our revenue or, increase the number of customers that we have over the next 2 years, or whatever it is, whatever those goals may be for that company, that's a good place, because then you can sort of break down what you need to get done from those high level goals, right? So I think that would be a good place to start in terms of analysis, right? Because then, if you want to, for example, triple your revenue, then you definitely know that you need to be tracking your revenue on a daily basis, right? Or you need to be tracking what your expenses are, because that's going to eat away at your profits, right? So that is definitely a good starting point. So it gives you a global view, and then you can tap into that and start digging through to say, okay, well, if this is what I'm trying to do, if I want to know about my customers, then I definitely need to be able to have a view of my customers. Who are they? What do they look like? What are their spending patterns? What are their buying patterns in terms of, are they more like millennials, or are they more like whatever it is, right? So you need to have that view and that understanding. And you can tie that directly, as I said, to your goals, your overall goals for the organization. It should be tied anyway for any company. It should always roll up to your overall goals. And I think that for companies as well that want to get started on a business intelligence path or a data sort of transformation journey, that they also need to identify some pain points. I think that's always a good thing, because you can get very focused. So maybe you could say, okay, we have this one report that takes 3 weeks to get done, and we only have one person that knows how to get it done. And by the time she's finished, the data is irrelevant, or, something is missing, or we have questions. And by the time the person goes and figure out answers to those questions, we're way behind the curve, right? So that's a pain point. So maybe just picking that report or pulling that report and saying, okay, how can we automate this, right? Because a big part of business intelligence and analytics is automation. And, you don't want to be doing the same thing every day. You don't want to be coming into office and pulling the reports and doing whatever. You really want to automate things. And you really want to have just things at your fingertips, right? So maybe you could identify a pain point and then try to automate whatever that is, or try to make it obviously more efficient. and reduce whatever bottlenecks you may have, whatever that may be, and then just solve that and have that as a quick win or some sort of business case or justification to maybe get budget to do something else or to get buy-in and support. Because that's a big thing as well, especially if it's going to be like maybe an IT person or IT team typically who probably say, maybe I'll try and solve this. And then if we have a win here, then I'll get some budget or get some support to actually take on a much larger project or something like that. So I think that would be a good win, just something that's a very important. It's a sore point for a lot of persons, especially the executives, the C-level persons. It's always good to win them over because they pull the purse strings or pull whatever strings. So it's all good if you could identify something that's directly impacting them and then try to solve that problem and then use that as some sort of business case to get additional funding to do more.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan and a good approach. So, it's all well and good though when, you have a healthy size organization, but for, MSMEs, so clearly they may not necessarily have the resources nor the manpower to, have staff that they can delegate to attend to business intelligence efforts. But so what might be some advice you would give them? Are there any sort of basic things they can do, any tools they can use? How could they begin to tap into the benefits of business intelligence?
Okay. All right. Well, for those, like for SMEs, for small businesses, they have an advantage, right? Because they do not have the legacy issues and culture and red tape and all of that of some of the larger companies that exist. So sometimes they don't. So I think they can be a little bit more agile, a little bit more flexible in their approach, and just be more open to what they want to do. They could probably even look at open source technologies. Maybe for some companies that's not possible, or maybe regulation doesn't allow it, or whatever it is. So I think small business actually have an advantage in that space where if they want to sort of, look at business intelligence for themselves and try and figure it out on their own, that they have the advantage of tapping into open source tools. Like there's an open source tool called R, which is used a lot for predictive analytics or just data analysis, which is free for anyone to use. And there are lots of free resources and free online courses that are available as well. You can get some free licenses to test out with a Power BI, Tableau, all these visualization tools that exist. So they could try that as well. And there are also other open source software that exists in the BI and data space. There are quite a few of them that they could look into. So they could start there. I think a really good place to start, of course, is strategy and understanding what you want as your outcome, what success looks like for you, and what it is that you want to achieve, right? What problems you want to solve. And I think when you have a clear understanding of that, then everything else sort of falls into place, as opposed to just saying, let's just get something and then, throw some data at it and see what comes out. I think when you have a strategy, a clear strategy, then that's probably the number one place to start.
Excellent. And I think that is a wonderful place to end. Mm-hmm. The importance of strategy, because I guess as much as data is king, it has to be directed in some way. And in knowing what your goals are, what it is you want to achieve, and then as you rightfully say, focusing on strategy and then looking at the data to help to inform that strategy. It's all about context.
Right. Agreed.
All right, so Raquel, just thank you so much for coming and giving us at least a primer on business intelligence. Hopefully we'll be able to delve into some specific areas at a later date.
Yes, thanks for having me. It was fun.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.